definitely we're going to figure out what is gray water, identify the sources, what can you collect from, and be able to use that water out on the landscape. And then determine the location and the type of gray water system that you're going to use at your home. And so first I want to just, because this is class 5 out of, well, 5 classes for the Hydrate series. And so at the very beginning, class 1, we talked about passive water harvesting. So I just want to bring back to that a little bit, just so passive water harvesting, that's all about our earthworks. Earthworks are going to slow spread and sink our rainwater and our gray water in the landscape. And so that's why I want to bring it up, because creating those earthworks first, that's always the best approach. Starting small and simple, get your earthworks in, and then your gray water has a place to go, your rain tank overflow has a place to go. And mentioning that, gray water and rain tanks are active systems, because you got to be involved. You have to turn on a tap, you got to do a load of laundry, you have to take a shower, you're involved somehow. So it makes it an active system. So passive, slow spread and sink that rainwater, gray water, and storm water. And then our active systems is our gray water and our rain tanks, where we're having to be in control and releasing that water. All right, what is gray water? Well, this is kind of a cute little image, but it's not quite what the laundry landscape is. Getting that laundry machine out to the landscape so you can use the water might be an option, but let's talk about gray water. Is basically you're reusing that, what's considered wastewater that's coming from your home. And so our showers, when we take a shower, the water coming out of the shower head, that's clean, potable water. And as soon as it touches my body, it now becomes gray water. Okay, so that gray water from the shower is a good source. Sinks are a good source too, including the kitchen sink. And I'll touch on that because that kind of gets in dark gray. But our laundry water, definitely a good source of gray water to send out to the landscape. And black water, we covered that last week with our composting toilet. So gray water does not include your toilet. That's definitely a black water scenario. So showers, sinks, and laundry machines, those are our good sources. And then what other sources that you have that you might be able to use in your landscape? So what is the most dangerous thing you can do with gray water? What is the most dangerous thing you can do with gray water? I want you to think about that for a minute. Because usually when I ask this question in a live audience, I get 2 answers, and both are correct. You never want to drink gray water. Absolutely, never want to drink it. It's not going to be good for you. But you don't want to store it. You do not want to store gray water for any length of time. And so when we're going through the information, there are some parts where it gets a little confusing, because when we talk about collection distribution systems, there's a surge tank. And that surge tank is not meant for storing that gray water. It's simply meant to take the surge of gray water, and then a pump kicks on and pumps that water out. So just to be clear, we never want to store our gray water for a future use. So we just want to use it as soon as it's made. And then what do we use it on? So we could use it on definitely our native desert adapted plants. It's just disperse it widely. They're not going to need as much. But if you have any moderate or high water use vegetation, gray water is perfect for that. So for those who, if you have any fruit trees, I call that the no-brainer. That's where I want to send my gray water, because that's a higher water use plant that can definitely use the gray water. Probably thinking, well, is that gray water safe to use? Well, we got to be smart about what we put in our gray water systems. And things that we don't want to, in our landscape, we don't want to put down our gray water system. So we don't want to kill our plants. We want to nourish our plants and make them healthy. So we want to avoid that chlorine and the bleach. Definitely our soils are really high in salt. So we're really high in alkaline. So we don't want to add more salts, more sodium through our soaps. So we've got to watch that. No boron, borax, and those things that tend to get your clothes whiter and brighter or break the grease up. We have to watch those, because they could be harmful for our plants, harmful for our soils. But a couple brands that I know that I've been using personally over the years is one is Oasis brand soap and Ecos, E-C-O-S soap. So the Oasis soap, you can order online. Greg Peterson's Urban Farm, he does a bulk order a couple times a year. If you get down to Tucson, there's a store there that sells it. But basically, you're either ordering online or here in the Valley, you're contacting Greg Peterson and see if you get on that bulk order. But Oasis is a good soap. They have a detergent, so for your laundry machine, and then they have an all-purpose soap that you can use for washing your dishes by hand. It's not for your dishwasher, unless you're the dishwasher, but an automatic dishwasher is not included in a Greywater system. Okay. So Ecos soap, that's E-C-O-S, that I can find pretty much at box stores. So I've been told it's at Costco. I find it at Sprouts, but there's different smells, but basically those brands are good for the landscape. That ecologycenter.org fact sheets, that's a good website to note down because the products you're using today could be perfectly fine for the landscape. So it doesn't mean that you have to change your products that you're using. You just want to make sure that the products you are using are safe for the landscape and for your plants. So definitely that ecologycenter.org fact sheets, and then Brad Lancaster's website, the harvesting, rainwater.com/greywater-harvesting. So take a look at those. Definitely, the fact sheets, they've done really over the years, they've done a good job. They've actually scaled back the information that they provided just because the producers, the manufacturers of the different products, they do change their recipes a little bit of what goes in and what ingredients go in. So basically, it's definitely good for a guideline, but you got to read the labels and know what product, what your products have. So the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality, that the ADAQ, they put out our Type 1 permit. The Type 1 permit is our permit for residential greywater use. And that's important to know because here in the state of Arizona, it is perfectly legal for us to use our greywater in the landscape as long as we follow these general permit best management practices. Because the Type 1 general permit is exactly that. You're just following these general best management practices. And I like to call them common sense practices. Because, for example, we'll just review quickly over these. But so when they say, first and foremost, avoid human contact with greywater and soil irrigated with greywater. Okay, now that's a common sense one. If you get greywater, if it splashes up on, wash it off, clean up. So just be cautious about that. You may use greywater for your household gardening. That's number 2. And I got all jazzed up about this when I was first learning about greywater because my big water user is my vegetable garden and my fruit trees. And so when I read that, household gardening, I thought, oh, perfect. I have a solution for my vegetable garden. However, that's not really what they're telling us there. They would have been better off to say an ornamental gardening. And actually in the new verbiage, they've changed it a little bit to where basically your food should not come in contact with greywater. And that's the important part. So greywater and food should never come in contact. So for example, where they say it's fine to use, especially on citrus and nut trees. So do not surface irrigate any plants that produce food except for citrus and nut trees. So that citrus and the nut trees, food's up here, greywater's down at the ground, they're not coming in contact. You're going to be peeling that layer of citrus. So that was their cautious, or a caution for us, is that if your food comes in contact with greywater, that's not safe. So keep in mind that you can use your greywater on your fruit trees. You might be able to use it on some other plants as well, food producing plants, as long as that food is above the greywater source and doesn't come in contact with it at all. Okay. And so use only flood and drip irrigation to water lawns and landscaping. Spraying greywater is prohibited. I love that one because I could just imagine out there, you got a pressurized system, you're spraying your greywater and all these particles are flying in the air. No, don't do that. It's common sense. We want to put the greywater down at the surface level or below the surface, okay? So When determining the location of your gray water irrigation, remember it cannot be in a drainage way. You don't want your gray water to drain off of your landscape through a drainage way into someone else's landscape. That is when you might get a phone call because your neighbor might not understand what's this sudsy substance that is coming through that drainage way. So definitely gray water may only be used in locations where groundwater is at least 5 feet below the surface. So here in the metro area, that's not a problem as far as the water table, but definitely out in Buckeye area, if you're out in that, check to see where your ground table is. If it's less than 5 feet, then that's your water table, then you can't use the gray water. You're gonna wanna label those pipes. So you gotta be able to identify a potable or a non-potable system. So gray water is like, well, for example, there's also what's called the reclaimed water. And reclaimed water is a different process. It goes down through the sewer system, it goes to the big treatment plants, it goes through a process, and then it gets pumped back out to use on parks and ponds and things like that as reclaimed water. Now that reclaimed water gets marked in purple. And so for gray water, you can mark your pipes in purple and it would be the same thing. It means do not drink this water. So definitely you got to label them, you got to mark them so people know that that's a gray water system and not a potable irrigation type system. And this is where the next one is where I just don't want you to get confused because it says cover, seal, and secure storage tanks to restrict access by small rodents and to control disease-carrying insects such as mosquitoes. Yes, if you have a collection distribution system, it's going to be a tank where the gray water is going to come into that tank. That tank needs to be sealed. You don't want any rodents getting in. You don't want to have any mosquitoes. So definitely, if you're going to use a collection distribution system that has a surge tank, not necessarily a storage tank, then you got to make sure that there's no access into that for critters. And then gray water cannot contain any hazardous chemicals, you know, antifreeze, mothballs, all those different things. You don't want to put those out into your landscape. Another common sense. Gray water from washing diapers or other infectious garments. Okay, so you can't put that straight to the landscape. That'd be a good time to divert to sewer, or you're going to have to disinfect those in a sink or something that's not in your gray water source before you put them in your washing machine. And then minimize surface accumulation of gray water. We don't want to have ponding of gray water, and definitely we don't want it standing for any amount of time that could, cause problems with mosquitoes. We want to disperse that gray water out in enough surface area so that way it can percolate into the soil and then get into the soil and start working its magic there. So filters may be used to reduce plugging and extend the gray water system's lifetime. Okay, right off the bat, I want to be clear, laundry to landscape systems do not require a filter. Okay, the laundry to landscape system, which we'll cover here in a moment, does not require a filter. Collection distribution systems will require a filter because of the pump and how they're distributing. So if you got a simple branch drain or a laundry landscape system, it does not need a filter. Collection distribution systems will need filters. And then if you are going to, if you're building your home and you're in an area where you need to put in a septic tank, you can't have your gray water, basically, you got to make the same calculations as if you're not putting in a gray water system. So you got to size that septic system as if you don't have a gray water system. That way, if you move, you sell the home in the future, a homeowner doesn't want to use gray water, then they still have that septic system that's adequate for them. All right, so that's the 13 best management practices. And if you want to check out, they have updated the information in the best management practices. The verbiage changed a little bit, but you can go on the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality website and look that up. It's in a whole other document with lots of other information. So this pamphlet is definitely easier to share and to show. But basically, it's all the same information. The big one was they got a little bit more lenient in the verbiage when it comes to our food. So just to make sure your gray water and your food should never come in contact. All right, so simple gray water systems. And this is not me. This is Brad Lancaster's brother, Brad Lancaster. He's the guru down in Tucson that's known for water harvesting. But yeah, that's Brad's brother. But that was my first outdoor shower system. I just had a hose that was out, along the pathway, collecting heat during the day, and then when I would shower, during the day, I'd find that it was extremely hot. And then I'd wait, and then it'd get just the right temperature. I'd get in there and start, sudsing up, and then it got really cold. So the system works well with a hose, but your hot water supply is limited, and then you might get cold water. That's amazing. If it's 110 degrees outside, that cold water and a little bit of breeze, whoo, it gets refreshing. So what I recommend is just plumbing in a cold and a hot water. So you have a cold line that's buried underground, and then you have a hot water line that's above ground, and then you got two valves that you're mixing them together. So makes it a simple system. This is a system that's not necessarily simple. This is more the complex way of using the shower gray water to get it out to the landscape, because you got to have a diversion valve. It's one of the things that we got to be able to divert to sewer if the gray water system has a backup. So in order to get that valve to switch between sewer and landscape, they had to lift their shower or lift their tub up to get that space in between the tub and the floor to get the valve in. So if that's not an option, think about moving your tub outside. Just creating that outdoor space. This is just a single outlet drain. Pretty basic. You can also use a bucket. So placing a bucket in your shower, or capturing that water and then going out and pouring it on the landscape. And if you have a compost system, it definitely needs water. So you can always pour it on your compost as well. So the kitchen resource drain. So I want to be clear that what you see in the photo there with that catch basin in the sink, so that little tub that you would fill up and then take out and empty, that is perfectly okay to use. ADQ, they're not concerned about that at all, because you're going to be very conscious about your use. So what does that mean? Conscious about my use for the kitchen sink. Why is it dark gray? Well, think about what you're putting in your sink. Is it healthy for the landscape? So things that they're really trying to avoid is they don't want any greases. No grease, oil going down the drain out into the landscape. Well, guess what? The city doesn't want you to do that either. You should not be putting grease, oil down the drain, because that clogs up the sewer system. If you put it in a gray water system, what it's going to do is that oil and grease, it's going to create a film on the surface of the soil to where it's not going to want to percolate any more water. So then what you have is basically your soil is plugged up and no more water is going to drain. So avoid any oils and greases. That shouldn't go in your drain at all, and it shouldn't go to the landscape. And then things that they're also worried about is washing off meats. So if you're washing off chicken or something like that, they're concerned about the bacteria and different pathogens that might happen. But there again, the USDA now recommends we do not wash our meats, because what they found is when you turn on that sink and you have your meat underneath there, then it splashes, and it can splash up to 2 feet around your kitchen sink area. So as the USDA says, wash your vegetables and cook your meats. So for gray water, that's perfect. If you're washing your vegetables, that gray water can go out to the landscape. That's not a problem. And you shouldn't be washing your meats anyway. So if what you're putting into that kitchen sink is safe for the landscape, then you can go ahead and use that. And that little tub is definitely an easy way of doing it. Another way is setting up a kitchen resource drain. Now, a kitchen resource drain through the Arizona State Department of Environmental Quality, putting in a kitchen resource drain is a acceptable method, as long as there's not a sewer connection within 600 feet. But when building a kitchen resource drain, when putting it in, the key is that the water has to be below grade. Okay, so when you're doing a kitchen resource drain, the water has to be below grade. And that's why you see that infiltration chamber. Let's see if I can get a pointer going here. So this infiltration chamber, it's open on the bottom, so there's nothing that's keeping the water from percolating through the soil. It's just got this void area. That void area is for roots. That way roots won't grow and grow back into the drain. Okay, so that's where you get that shape to where it's not, don't think of it as capacity of holding water, it's just air. So that way roots won't grow back into your pipes. So having this flow splitter, we'll talk about that more in a moment, but that's going to get the water to split to both basically the top and the bottom, or the beginning and the end of that infiltration chamber. And then underneath the sink, this is important because that three-way valve, that Jandy valve, that's how you're going to switch between the sewer and the landscape. And then there's a P-trap that's not shown, but that P-trap is important so that way it keeps so the critters won't come back in from the landscape. And then once you get out to the landscape, well, actually it's coming up in another photo. I want to show you that infiltration chamber, what it looks like. But keep in mind, for kitchen resource drain, it has to go underground. But if this is more complex, then keep in mind, you can always just put a little catch basin in your sink and you can catch that water and then go dump it out. Now, the laundry landscape system, we're definitely going to cover more of this, but it's what I call the Cadillac out of all the type of gray water systems that you can connect to a laundry machine. So the laundry landscape. So on gray water systems, there's ways of distribution and then different outlets. Okay, and we're going to cover them. So, for example, single outlets, multi-stack outlets, branch drains, laundry landscape, and those collection of pump systems. Those are all distribution. Now an outlet, and so surface outlets, mulched outlets, infiltration chambers, emitters, L2L, and emitters pump systems. I'd like to take those words emitters and just keep them as outlets, because I don't want you to be confused with a drip emitter, especially on our laundry landscape system, and well, basically anything that's not a filtered system, which is our collection distribution systems. Okay, this is just a simple single outlet that you're seeing here. That outlet is coming out, it's 10 feet away from the house. So that's International Building Code. We shouldn't sink water within 10 feet from the foundation. So it's best to get that out past the foundation. And then there is an air vent. That's important. There's the P-trap. Okay, that keeps the critters from coming back up into the sink. And then notice it's above the mulch. This is good because that gray water can fall out into the mulch. It's not going to get plugged up and roots can't grow up through the air and into that pipe. So that's good. And then take notice of what Brad Lancaster has here in his gray water basin. He has a fruit tree. He has artichokes. Those artichokes are way up and above from that gray water. Not a problem. And same with the chiltepedes. So that mulch in the basin is also very important, and a organic mulch is going to be better than a rock mulch, but having some sort of mulch to help hold that moisture in. Okay, multi-pipe. So this is a scenario where it's a single outlet, but you have multiple outlets. You have multiple pipes. Okay, so this is definitely for a system that's outdoors. Because for indoor plumbing, it wouldn't make sense to install that many standpipes in your laundry room. But definitely, if you have a system outside, this would be a good scenario. And you simply change the drain from the washer machine to the pipe to go to the tree that you want to water. And so as you see, it's labeled apple, fig, citrus, and sewer. So if I was needing to do a laundry with some chemicals, I would put it to sewer. But every other load, I'd go to apple. And then I might do a load or two on the apple, and then I'd go to the fig. So just depending on how much gray water you're getting from each, from your washing machine, then you can alternate them back and get a good deep soak on those trees. So splitting the flow. Okay, this is this little flow splitter right here. Actually, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment. Okay, so this is a flow splitter. It's also called a double L. So if you go into a plumbing store and you say, I need a flow splitter, they're going to look at you and they're not going to know what you're talking about. But this is a double L, pretty standard in plumbing. It's 1.5 inches or it's going to be 2 inch. Now, it doesn't have the hole. Okay, it doesn't have the hole, but you're going to drill this. And then you're going to get a rubber stopper to put into that hole. Okay, now that is a custom flow splitter. You started out with a double L ABS pipe fitting, and then you made it into a flow splitter by drilling a hole right in the center. Now, if you could look down through this hole, you're going to see a ridge that basically splits that water, going one direction or the other direction. And so that flow splitter, that's how we know how much water is going to the right and how much water is going to the left. So for example, if we're watering a citrus tree and a pomegranate tree, the citrus tree is going to need more water than the pomegranate. So I might want to give, maybe 60% of water to the citrus and 40% or 70-30. And how do I know that? I'm just going to look through that inspection port and I'm going to watch to see how much water goes to the citrus and how much is going over there to the pomegranate. And then once I got that set, then I'm going to backfill and make sure everything's locked in there. Okay, so that's a flow splitter. Okay, so splitting the flows. Notice we have the washing machine. It's from the washer. It's coming out. You got a flow splitter here. It's going to go out. And then you got a 1/4 inch of the flow, quarter amount of the flow, and a 1/4 amount of the flow here. And then you're splitting again. And then it's an 1/8 amount and an 1/8 amount. Okay, so as you keep splitting them out, you're reducing the amount of water. And then notice from the tub, we got a flow splitter and then another flow splitter and then some more flow splitters. Okay, so you're going to reduce the amount of water that goes to each of those outlets every time that you split it. So keep that in mind. And then if you can keep those sources already split, so instead of bringing your laundry water and your tub water all into one source, that's good, because now you help be able to create that oasis zone around your house based on where your fixtures are. All right. This is what it looks like out in the landscape. You're going to see up here where the pipe is. Let me get right here. That's where the pipe is coming out of the wall. And that's nice. That's way up above the grade level of the landscape. So we got some good fall right there before we get to the landscape level. And then at the landscape, we're dropping down. So we're going to be right just below basically the surface. And then there's a flow splitter. It's going to split, go in this direction, and then it splits and go in this direction. Then we have another flow splitter here, and then another flow splitter. Now, notice those flow splitters are in valve boxes because you're going to need to find them, and then you're going to have to make sure that they're functioning the way that you intended when you installed the system, and to make sure that no roots or anything are growing inside and causing any problems, or if you have any clogs. So put your flow splitters in valve boxes, irrigation valve boxes, so that way you can easily access them. And here's a good way of showing, as far as when you're getting that pipe, notice there's a little bit of drop right here. The more that we can get that water to drop and move and keep moving through, but we have to keep a 1/4 inch per foot. So that's important, a 1/4 inch per foot on your branch drain pipe. So and that's the same as your sewer pipe. Sewer pipe has to have a 1/4 inch of slope per foot. So that way it could get those solids and everything to move through the sewer pipe. Well, same with our gray water. We want to make sure that the gray water moves through that branch drain system. So you're going to have a 1/4 inch per foot of slope on that pipe. So when thinking about that, 4 inches of elevation drop is going to be 16 feet out in the landscape. Okay. So 4 inches of drop is 16 feet out in the landscape of a 1/4 inch per foot. And so if you're creating that oasis zone around your house within that 16 feet, the question would be is, do you have enough elevation drop for your pipes, for the end of the pipes to be able to daylight above the mulch? Okay. If not, it might have to go underground. And we'll show some photos there. Okay. So number one, this is clear. That was just like you saw in the photos from the previous image, where that pipe is up above where the basin and the mulch is going to be. That is perfect. If you can achieve that, that's the ideal scenario. If you're in California, or if you have dogs or animals that are going to be attracted to that gray water, or you don't want to see the gray water when it comes out of the pipe, stack some rocks around it. And the reason why I say if you're in California, it's code in California, you have to cover your gray water end pipes. They can't just be exposed. So you have to put them in. Another solution too is you could put a valve box. And so they come out in a valve box and then drain out from there, have little holes. The under mulch, okay. I want you to take a look here. We got this system. This is our flow splitter. Okay. And then that pipe comes out. Notice it would be right at the bottom of the basin. Okay. So because of that, that's not a good scenario. Because if it's below the mulch and it's basically right at the bottom of the basin level, well, roots could start growing into that pipe. You know, mulch and things could help, you know, clog up the pipe. So you need some sort of chamber. This is just a 5-gallon bucket turned over. So the top of the bucket is actually now the bottom of the bucket that's going to be on the ground. And then the bottom of the bucket is now facing up, it's the top. You're going to cut a hole in the bottom of the bucket. That's your inspection port. And then you're going to cut these, drill these holes in the side of the bucket to get that water to drain out. Okay. So basically creating a little infiltration chamber. And then your other option is under the soil, which is back to that infiltration chamber. So remember the kitchen resource drain that I was showing you earlier, and they said it has to go in an infiltration chamber? Well, this is your next photo of showing it installed before the mulch is installed on top of this infiltration chamber. So there's 2 infiltration chambers placed together, and then you have one pipe coming in to the, basically into the front, to the beginning of the infiltration chamber, and then you have another pipe coming down to the end. Okay. Now you could use the same system for your laundry, for your shower. It could be below grade. The thing is it's not about the area inside the infiltration chamber. It's all about the surface area that it's sitting on. And so for gray water, it's not about how big and deep we make our basins. It's how much surface area do we have at the bottom of the basin. Because it's the surface area depending on how much, your percolation rate. Is that water going to be able to absorb into the soil, or does it need more surface area to spread it out to give it a chance to soak into the soil? Okay, so keep that in mind. If you're using infiltration chambers, you're going to calculate the square foot area of the footprint. And so, for example, these chambers are roughly 2 by 5. And so that's 10 square feet of surface area. So each chamber would be 10 square feet. So 2 chambers is 20 square feet of surface area. So keep that in mind when we're talking more about calculating surface areas. All right, but this is the ideal scenario. If you can get that gray water pipe to come out above the mulch, that's golden. Overcoming gravity. So this is an interesting way of overcoming gravity. So just a simple little hand pump placed inside. So this is inside where the bathtub is. And then the black pipe is outside of the bathroom. So the pump, it's going to get that water to pump and then start siphoning out. And then that water is going to go down and out into the landscape, into a branch drain, and then dispersed out to the trees and throughout the landscape. So overcoming gravity, maybe a little simple hand pump to get that water up and out. Now your washing machine has a pump in it. And the washing machine is going to pump that water out. And it could pump it into a surge tank. Now, keep in mind that the surge tank needs to be at least the size of what your washing machine is going to do in a load. Now, granted, each rinse cycle might happen 2 or 3 times, depending on your washing machine. So definitely for the rinse cycle, but think about it, if your washing machine is going to use 30 gallons per load, you'd want a 30-gallon surge tank. Okay. And another thing on the surge tank is notice there is no hose bib, right? There's no valve. There's no way to turn or turn off the water coming out of that hose. And that is important. We never want to store our gray water. So if I put a valve here, now I'm going to be tempted to turn that valve off, do a load of laundry. Now I'm going to wait a couple of days. My tree doesn't need water today. It needs it 4 days from now. And then I'm going to go and release that water. Well, the gray water is one, it's going to smell, and it is probably going to start being problematic at that point. So also by not putting a valve here, it's going to keep us from not storing that water. And it's also going to keep it from us forgetting to turn it on and releasing the water when you do the next load. Because if you had a valve here and it was turned off, the barrel is going to fill up. You do your next load of laundry, where's the overflow? Well, it's likely going to come out where you've connected, depending on how you connected it. It may go back into your washing machine. In this design, it'd be handy to put in just a little extra overflow. So that way, if there was any clogs or any problems, at least it's going to overflow from the barrel and out. So a little enhancement to this design. So this is called a drum system because you're using a drum, a surge tank. Water gets pumped from the washing machine into the surge tank, and then just gravity flows out this hose. Now that hose, you got to move around, okay? And now the drum is going to be at a certain height, and you're going to have so you're going to have head pressure. And that's where the water, as it's filling up in that drum and it's getting released through that hose, you're going to have a little bit of head pressure for that gravity, but it's not going to be much. And so the shorter that you have your hose, the better. So that way you can get it to where you want it. And then just keep in mind when you're moving that hose, if you're going to do, like, for example, first rinse cycle, I water at this spot. Second rinse cycle, I water at that spot. Then I come back, first rinse cycle to the same spot. I just repeat. Keep in mind that the first rinse cycle coming off the washing machine is going to be higher in the salts, the things that are coming from our clothes, from our sweat. So you don't want to come back and just kind of focus at one point on that first cycle. You just want to move it around. But you also got to remember you have to move that hose around. So it's a little bit of work. So that's why I call the laundry to landscape the Cadillac of all laundry to landscape gray water systems. Because it uses the pump in the washing machine to pump that water out to the landscape. So you're probably thinking, wait a minute, is my pump in my washing machine going to handle that? Well, the pumps are rated to lift water up 5 feet to get the water up and out of say if it's lower in a basement area. Where that pump and that it's rated to that 5-foot lift. Well, when we were thinking about our distribution lines and all the friction that comes along with that, we got to keep that in mind. So Art Ludwig, who coined this phrase laundry to landscape, so Art Ludwig with Oasis Design out of Santa Barbara, California, he's the one that, oh, where did I put my book? So Oasis with Greywater, Art Ludwig, lots of information on his website regarding a laundry to landscape system. He's got a whole video on it. So definitely lots of resource on how to install this particular system. But there's key components that I want you to keep in mind. A key component is this ball valve. Okay. That's how you're going to divert to sewer or to the landscape. So when this ball valve is set, so for example, this one's going to go up and out to the landscape. But if I push it down, then it's going to go out to the sewer. And that's this little drain here with the sink. Over here on this one, it shows where the washer machine connects to the three-way valve. And then you have the sewer, and it's labeled sewer, and that's going to go down into the standpipe and then out to the landscape. Okay. And then notice in these two photos, what you don't see is this that you see in the third photo in the bottom. and that's the inline vent, also known as an auto vent, a Studer vent. It might have 6 other names, but that's a vent that's going to release the air, so that way your system doesn't go through a basically a siphon during the rinse cycle, where it's just continuing to siphon water out. The water will never reach the level in the washing machine and tell it to stop, so it just will continue to run. So that inline vent, auto vent, Studer vent, it's a vent that you're going to need to find that is part of the system. So that's important. So we have the 3-way ball valve, an inline vent. Okay. So other thing that's important to keep in mind is you may have to clean out your system. So on the outside, and that's where I like to put that inline vent. I only put it on the inside if that's my only option. I can't put it on the outside for whatever reason. But if we can put it on the outside, that's your best choice. They are rated for indoor use. You know, look on the label. If you are using an inline vent for indoors, make sure it is rated for indoor use. But if we have it on the outside, it also acts as an extra overflow. So if there's any clogs in the system, the water is going to come out of that vent. So to be able to clean the system out, that's where you can install what's unions. And this is all typical plumbing supply material, PVC pipe, Schedule 40, 1 inch, and then there are unions. So for a union, okay, that's what we got here. That's this is the device you're seeing in the bottom left-hand corner of the image, okay? And so what we would do, this is your piece that you're gonna use when you need to clean out your system. And so you're gonna undo the union at where it connects to the poly tube. You're gonna undo this connection here, and then you're gonna put this connection onto it. Okay. And then you're gonna put a garden hose on it, but you gotta make sure on your garden hose at the faucet, at the hose bib of your garden hose, that you have this little backflow preventer. Because what we don't want gray water to come back into the house plumbing. So you gotta make sure that you have a little backflow preventer on that garden hose. Okay. And so then once you get it to where it's cleaned out, then you'll go ahead and just disconnect your little service connection, and you'll connect it back to the PVC pipe. So you'll notice all the indoor plumbing was the PVC pipe and then to the poly tube. You could do the indoor plumbing with the poly tube connections as well. I personally like the cleaner use of the PVC connection for all indoor use coming outside, and then I switch to the poly tube. And all this connection here, so this connection and this connection, they're the same. It could be below ground too. You could have it below ground and put it into a valve box so you don't see it. A little harder to get to, but it's definitely for aesthetics, you could do that as well. Oh, and I should say, how often do you have to clean out your gray water laundry and landscape system? Well, it depends. It's going to depend on what are you putting through your laundry machine, because there's no filter on the gray water. So once it leaves your laundry machine, there's no filter in the laundry and landscape. And that's good. We don't want a filter on that. We want to be able to get that out to the landscape, let the landscape be the filter, because if there's a filter, then it's something I got to clean. So if I don't put a filter in, then I just got to make sure that my system doesn't clog up. And to kind of give you an idea, I used my system for about 5 years before I had a clog. And I ended up just taking a coat hanger and putting it through one of the outlets and was able to unclog it that way. And then there was the year where our washing machine, we ended up replacing it with a brand new washing machine. That brand new washing machine didn't work right off the bat. It had problems with it. So I didn't want to hook up my laundry landscape system until the service techs were done working on the washing machine, because I didn't want them to blame my setup. So it was about 6 months where I didn't use the laundry to landscape system at all. And because it dried over that 6 months, I did. I cleaned it out. So I hooked up that garden hose and I flushed that whole system. And it's good to get all that stuff because it dried and kind of caked off. And anyway, cleaned out the whole system. So, and I just went to a home that we installed a system through the water harvesting certification course back in 2012. So 8 years. So 8 years before there was a clog to where they saw it overflow. So how often? It's going to depend. Once a year is it's a good maintenance practice, just to hook up that garden hose and flush your system so then you don't have to worry about it getting clogged up. So do your yearly maintenance and you won't have to worry about it. But if it does clog up, that's how you clean it out, is hooking up that hose. Just make sure you have your backflow preventer. Okay, so once we're out in the landscape, as I mentioned, we're using polytubing. So polytubing 1 inch is our main distribution, and then we branch off to 1/2 inch polytube. And that's what you're seeing in this photo. There's the 1 inch polytubing, and then here's a 1/2 inch polytubing. So it's a barbed fitting. That's what you're seeing in this photo here. So it's a 1 inch to 1/2 inch. So it's 1 inch to 1/2 inch. Okay, T. So it's 1 inch to 1/2 inch T. Then you're gonna use a 1/2 inch polytubing with the 1/2 inch full port ball valve on the end. So this is what it looks like out into the landscape. This is your outlet. That's why I don't like calling them emitters, because a drip emitter, as I mentioned, there's no filter. Once it leaves that laundry machine, there's no filter on this. So a drip emitter, it would clog up with that gray water. Okay, so we don't want to use a drip emitter. I like that full port 1/2 inch ball valve because that's a good size diameter hole, and then I can adjust them. So I can turn this valve to fine tune. If I get too much water out of one, I can close it a little bit, get more water out of the other. And then depending on your laundry machine, you're gonna have at least 4 to 12 outlets. And it's gonna depend on how big of a drain hose that you have on your washing machine. So for example, if it's a 1 inch diameter hose coming off your washing machine, you're gonna want at least 6 outlets, 6 1/2 inch outlets, because if you do the math when thinking about the inside diameter, those 6 outlets are going to be equivalent of a 1 inch diameter hose. So we don't want to restrict the water. That's the important part. Okay. And so, for example, my washing machine is just a small little washing machine, and it has a 1/2 inch diameter hose. And so I only was able to put 4 outlets on my laundry landscape system because if I put more, I just wasn't getting much water out to them. So 4 was enough. Okay, so when thinking about those earthworks and where to put your gray water, so this was an existing peach tree. We did a shallow basin around it. We buried the pipe, but before doing that, we painted it purple. Okay. And then here's the 1/2 inch polytubing with the 1/2 inch ball valves at the end. Okay, another scenario here. So you can't quite see it, but there's a hose right here. Okay, so that hose and is connected to a valve assembly that's right here. That valve assembly is creating zones. So what you're seeing is you got one polytube, 1 inch polytube that runs this way and around a fruit tree, and that's one zone. And then you have a second pipe or second zone coming around these trees here. And each of those zones has 4 outlets. Okay. How I created those zones, let me stop sharing for a moment. Okay. So this is your connection where you got 1 inch polytubing connecting here, and then a 1 inch ball valve. And so you could see, you could build a manifold with as many of these 1 inch ball valves as you want. Okay, so you can create as many zones as that you're going to need, and then you turn on. So turning off that zone is just as simple as going out and turning that valve, and then turning it back on for the zone that you want. And then you would turn one on, turn this one off, turn this one on, turn this off. Now, I'm human. I'm going to forget. Well, I'm going to forget, and I'm going to leave both of these valves off. Well, where's that gray water going to go? It's going to go through my overflow. That's why there would be a pipe connected here that goes up and to the landscape. So if I forget and turn these valves off, then water can still go out an unvalved pipe. Okay, and that's what we're seeing. Let me share that again. And that's what we're seeing right here. That's that pipe. Okay, so from the connector from right here goes to that pipe. Okay, so always plan for your overflow. No matter if it's earthworks, rain tanks, or gray water, you got to plan for that overflow. And before backfilling your line, make sure you paint it in purple. All right, so these are definitely complex systems, the collection distribution. And I hope I made it clear that the other systems we've talked about so far, branch drain systems, laundry landscape systems, do not require a filter. But these collection distribution systems absolutely require a filter. If you don't put a filter on these systems, you're going to be, well, you're looking for trouble. Because what it does, the water, back there. Okay, so here's the part that hasn't been connected yet during the installation. There's going to be a pipe that's going to connect from this little brass fitting up to this blue filter. Okay, now when the water comes through the pipe, so this is from a shower, this is from a laundry machine. The laundry machine and shower water is going to go into this surge tank. That's not to store it, but it's a surge tank that's going to get sealed. And then you see there's a pump in there. So when water comes inside the surge tank, then that pump's going to kick on, and it's going to pump that water out through this hose, through the filter. Then once it gets through the filter, then it's going to go out through irrigation drip line that's made, it's called Irrigrate. And it's supposed to be a special emitter for back flushing that gray water to help out if there is any extra particles. But I can tell you, it is reliant on this filter, because without that filter, the gray water is going to clog up that Irrigrate drip line. If you're familiar with a product called Netafim drip, it's very similar. You're going to have emitters every 12 inches or every 18 inches apart. Great solution to get water out past your from that 16 feet oasis zone for using a branch drain, or limitations with laundry landscape systems. So if your gray water sources are all below grade, so too low in the ground to be able to get that water up and out above ground, then collection distributions start to make sense. But keep in mind that filter has to be in place, because if you take that filter off, then your whole irrigation line is going to fill up with gray water. It's going to clog up with gray water particles. You're going to, well, and say, okay, I don't take it off, but I get lazy and I don't clean it. You're going to burn up the pump. Okay. So if you don't clean the filters, then your pump could burn out. If you remove the filter, then your system's going to clog up with gray water. There's another product called Aqua to Use. So there's Aqua to Use is a different setup. So the photo you're seeing, this is an Irrigrate setup. An Aqua to Use uses, basically it looks like a, it's about the size of a milk crate, maybe a little bit larger. And then the gray water comes in, same scenario, all your sources, it's too low, it's below grade, so all your water is coming in. It comes through the filters first and then to the pump. So it's going to go through these sheet filters first, and then it gets to the pump. Then the water, will kick on the pump and out through the distribution line. So with that scenario, you're not going to burn up your pump if you don't clean out the filters. What's going to happen is if you don't clean the filters, then it's going to overflow to the sewer, and it's not going to make it to the pump. So scenario there is you're not burning up your pump, but you're losing your gray water. So you clean your filters. The water is going to pass through those filters and then get to the pump and then kick off and distribute that into the landscape. And there again, with the Aqua to Use, they say you can use a irrigation drip emitter, but be sure your filters are definitely clean. you could do a combo where, or kind of a hybrid you want. So instead of using drip emitters, you could put on those 1/2-inch outlets. So you just got those ball valves out there and you're adjusting them that way. So thinking about how you can customize your collection distribution system if your drip tubing continues to get clogged. But the reason why I would use a collection distribution system is if it's just simply if my water coming from the house is too low in the landscape, so it's already coming out, you know, a foot or so below grade, and I can't get that water back up and into the landscape, or I can't get it to be within the soil profile. I might be 2 feet or lower, and that's too deep to be watering with gray water. So a collection distribution system would be able to get that water from, you know, below grade up and out to the landscape. If that's not the scenario, I personally would avoid a collection distribution system because of the filters, because of the complexity. And that's why I like the laundry to landscape system, is if I'm building that, if my laundry machine is close to an exterior wall, then I can build a gray water system that is very simple to use. It's just doing laundry, and then make sure it's maintained and working correctly. All right, so you should have received a link to an activity sheet today. It will, your activity sheet. So the activity sheet that you have, this is part of your homework. We're gonna step through the calculations. I want you to thinking about these numbers, because how much gray water can you produce from what sources? And so the laundry, to do the math there, how many gallons does your laundry machine use? So that top loader, 30 to 40 gallons. Yep, that's pretty realistic. Front loading, 15 to 25 gallons. That's pretty realistic there as well. Maybe even a little bit higher, up to 28 gallons I've seen on some high efficiency front loaders. But good numbers to use. For example, my little small washing machine, it is 15 gallons. And how did I know? Well, I looked all over in that manual to try to find out and I couldn't find any information on how many gallons it would be in a rinse cycle. So I got a 5-gallon bucket. Me and my wife, Erica, we did a load of laundry, and when I did a rinse cycle, I had that 5-gallon bucket. Actually, I had 2 5-gallon buckets, because if that first 5-gallon bucket filled up, I was able to put another one on. So anyways, and between the 2 rinse cycles, we get 15 gallons. So figure out how many gallons that your washing machine uses, and then how many loads of laundry do you do a week? And so one person typically, you know, whites, darks, maybe 2 loads. 2 people in a household, it depends on the size of your washing machine, what type of laundry, you know, what you're doing. But anyway, if you, one person, maybe 2 a week, maybe only once a week. 2 people, you might be 2 or 4 loads a week. And then it kind of just really depends. So, but it depends on your household. How many loads of laundry are you doing a week? And don't be shy about this. Be realistic, because you don't want to underestimate your gray water system. You want to make sure that you basically design it for that peak. So for example, like, well, I normally only do 4 loads of laundry a week. However, once a month, I bring in towels from say a pet store or something like that. And you're doing all these loads of towels from a pet place. How many loads of laundry is that? And then also think too, you know, the hair and things, so you might have to clean it more. Okay. But you're going to want to design your system for that maximum, that peak. Or, you know, you're going to have to possibly divert some of that gray water when you're doing that peak type of load. Okay. And then your showers. How many gallons is your shower head? How many gallons per minute? If you're not too sure, 2 gallons is a good number to use. There are shower heads that are higher, more gallons than that. There's high efficiency shower heads that are less than 2 gallons. But if you're not for sure, use a 2. And then how long do you shower? And be realistic on this. And for your household too. So Some scenarios, as adults, you may be showering, say 5 minutes, but if you have some teenagers, they may be taking 10 or 20 minutes. You got to add that in because it's all about how much gray water is being used during that maximum peak. Okay. And then times that by 52 weeks because you're not going anywhere, right? You're staying home for 52 weeks out of the year. If you're not, if you're going to be traveling, if you know, oh, well, I know I'm gone 2 weeks out of the year. And, or there might be a scenario where, well, I'm leaving for, a month or 2 months out of the year. Well, who's home doing laundry or who's at home taking showers? If no one is, then there's no gray water to support those plants in the landscape. So how are they going to get water? Do you have them on an irrigation system? Or is the person that's watching your home, are they doing laundry? Are they taking a shower? So you got to keep that in mind. You also want to keep it in mind that if you have a household with young kids and you're designing your system around all the water use of, say, a household of 5 kids, 2 adults, well, at some point, you probably are going to, hoping that maybe those kids will leave the nest at some point. And when they do, now they're not at home creating that gray water that your landscape is relying on. So make sure that when you design your system that if the gray water gets reduced, where are you going to make up that water to support your landscape? Okay. So do the numbers, figure out how much, how many gallons of laundry, how many showers. And gray water is definitely best for those moderate to high water use vegetation. So as I said earlier, it's kind of a no-brainer. If you have any fruit trees, definitely, that's where I send it. Keep in mind, we can put it to our desert adapted plants. It just would disperse it out more widely, just using more outlets. And then use it as supplemental irrigation. So you'll find that gray water in the cool seasons, well, you may have too much. And in the warm seasons, you may not have enough. And that's because the plants are going to require water differently throughout the year. So during the summer, they need more water, and during the wintertime, they need less water. And so for those warm seasons, think about your rainwater, your AC, condensate, evaporative cooler. Do you have a reverse osmosis system, something else that you can tap into to help with that gray water source? And so then it's figuring out, what does your plants need? So if you haven't done already, since this is class 5, so we've covered this as far as calculating your water needs for your plants. But this is kind of a refresher, and for those who haven't attended the other classes, that conversion factor is numbers that we created to just help out with the math. Because there's a chart that you'd have to look at as far as the evapotranspiration rates, the crop coefficient, all these different things that we would look at for calculating how many gallons of water per square foot area. So in order to kind of help with that math, we did the conversion factors. So these conversion factors are only good for the Phoenix metropolitan area because it's based off of our evapotranspiration rates here in the valley area and the crop coefficient. So by using those conversion factors, that's just going to help out with your math. But the formula, we're going to take pi, that's 3.14, and then we're going to take the radius squared. So radius times 3.14, and that's going to give us the surface area. And it's all about the square foot surface area underneath that tree. And then how many inches of water is it going to need, okay? And then how's that equated to gallons? So for example, a peach tree, it's a 5-foot radius. Okay, so it's a 10-foot diameter peach tree, pretty common for an urban orchard tree. So 5 foot times 5 foot times 3.14 equals 78.5. So underneath that 10-foot diameter fruit tree, peach tree, there's 78.5 square foot area. So then we're going to take that 78.5, and a peach tree is a moderate water use tree. So we're going to take that by 19. And we get almost 1,500 gallons a year. So that peach tree, 10-foot diameter, is going to require roughly 1,500 gallons a year. So you say, well, I have an apple tree. How much is that going to require? An apple tree is also a deciduous fruit tree. So the deciduous fruit trees are less water than the non-deciduous fruit trees like citrus. Okay, so like your pomegranates, your apples, your peaches, trees that are dropping their leaves are going to be close to that 1,500 gallons a year, 10-foot diameter. Now your citrus tree, a 10-foot radius, this must be a grapefruit tree. It's huge, 20-foot diameter citrus tree. Okay, so we're going to take that 10-foot times 10 foot times 3.14. That gives us 314 square feet underneath that tree. So 314 square foot area. We're going to take that by 28 because citrus trees are a high water use plant. And that gives us almost 9,000 gallons a year, 8,792 gallons a year. So if we took that same number, 78.5, so if our citrus tree was only 10-foot radius or 10-foot diameter versus 20-foot diameter, which would mean it's a 5-foot radius, now that citrus tree is only going to require about 2,200 gallons of water a year. Okay, so the smaller the citrus tree, the smaller the square foot area, then the less water, less root system that it has. Okay. So how much water do your plants need? So this is going to be some homework for you. You have your sheet with you. It has the conversion factors. So choose the type of tree you want to use. Is it low, moderate, high water use? What's the conversion factor? So figure out what type of tree. And if you're not sure how much water this tree needs, do some research behind it. If it's one of our low to moderate, you may even find it in the Arizona Municipal Waters Users Association's plant guide. There's, on the plant guides, they give a little drop of how much, kind of represented as a very low or moderate water use plant. But do some research, figure out, but there again, if it's citrus, it's definitely higher. If it's a deciduous type of fruit tree, I go with a moderate. Okay. So then you're going to calculate your annual water needs, get that by, and then do that for all the plants that you're going to water with your Greywater system. And then determining where are you going to place your Greywater system. So in the first week, we did an outline of our property. And this was just for those who are joining us, when creating your drawing, start with the property line and then draw your house, your structure, your tree, everything within that. Draw to scale is always the best scenario, but if you don't have a scale or you're just getting thoughts out, bubble drawings are good. But you're going to want to include the property lines, the house, any other permanent structures, any existing trees, any new trees that you're going to put in. And then draw in where your washing machine is. Where's your bathtub? Do you have any hardscape? What are the obstacles that you're going to have to get? So for example, with that purple square that just popped up, get that purple square. So right here is a washing machine. But then this gray area is concrete. So now I got an obstacle. I got my Greywater here, but I have this concrete to get out to the landscape. So it's pretty much, I'm limited to, I'm going to have to cut that concrete, make a channel, and get that pipe installed under it. Okay, so now I got my 1-inch distribution line out into the landscape. And I'm going to start distributing it to these smaller little trees. So I got water going there, 3 outlets, got 3 outlets on that one, 3 outlets on that one, and 3 more outlets on that one. So that's a 12 outlet system. So your washing machine for in this scenario must be probably a top loader. 30 to 40 gallons, it's usually a larger pump to get all that water out. And that's typically when you're going to be able to maximize, get that up to 12. And I've seen up to 18 outlets on some washing machines. If you have a smaller washing machine like I do, think of how many zones you could create. So I could create 4 zones. I have 1 zone for the first tree, a 2nd zone for the 2nd tree, a 3rd zone for the 3rd, and 4th for the 4th. Okay. Now there'll be 4 distribution lines coming out from that valve assembly, but it's a good way that you're going to be able to get water out to each tree. And then what you could do is you do a few loads on one tree and then you switch to the next, do a few loads. Then next week you're going to alternate so that way you're getting good deep soaks on your trees. Okay. Yeah. So figure out what obstacles you have, what's your closest resources that you can utilize, and then what's the best method. Do you have enough slope to work with? Can you use a branch drain system? Is it within 16 feet of your house? Is all the gray water going to be below grade and there's no way of getting it up and above without a collection distribution system? Is your laundry machine really the only source of gray water that you can get out to the landscape? If you have all these obstacles, is it an option of moving that laundry machine outside? And if you do, never disassemble your indoor laundry connection, because that's your backup. Because if it fails on the outside, you can come back to the inside, and that will satisfy the divert back to sewer if your gray water system clogs. All right, so draw that in on your plan, sketch it out. What kind of gray water system are you going to use? Choose a location. But definitely on those plans, if I would focus on the ones that are going to really require the most water. So as I mentioned earlier in my story, I thought it was going to be my garden, but it's not my garden, it's my fruit tree. And once I started thinking about really what my water user is, it really simplified on how I'm using my gray water. And then I got all, didn't have to worry about it coming in contact with food or anything like that. All right. So as I mentioned earlier, now this kind of gets into that advanced, it's all about surface area when we're sinking our gray water. And so you'd want to do a percolation test. You want to dig a hole about 1 foot deep and 1 foot wide. You're going to fill it full of water. You're going to fill it full of water. You're going to get it saturated. And then you're going to come out again the next day and you're going to fill it full of water and you're going to time to see how long it goes down. So for example, let's go down 1 inch. So if it takes less than 30 minutes to go down 1 inch, well, you have a disposal rate of 0.4. If it takes longer, so 40 to 45 minutes to go down 1 inch, and then 60 to 120. So this is all about how basically on changing the amount of surface area that you're going to need based on your percolation. So if the water is going to soak through the soil really quick and easy, then we don't have to have as much surface area. But if the water is not soaking in, you got bad percolation, it takes over 2 hours to get down 1 inch, then you're going to have to times that square foot area by 2. So you're basically doubling it. So the scenario, 3 loads of laundry, that's your peak, at 20 gallons per load. A 0.4 disposal loading rate is going to require 24 square feet. Okay, so we take 3 times 20, so we're taking that peak, whatever it might be, times how many gallons, and then we're going to times it by the disposal rate to get the square foot area. So in this scenario, 3 loads a week, 20 gallons per load, 0.4 disposal rate, 24 square feet. Say if I wanted to use infiltration chambers for this laundry water, or for this gray water, the 3 loads per week, 24 square feet. Remember, each infiltration chamber was only 10 square feet. So how many infiltration chambers will I need? I would need 3 of them. So that way I can get at least 24 square foot area, surface area, for that gray water to soak in. Okay. Yes, there's always maintenance. So for laundry and landscape, monthly, make sure those emitters are flowing, nothing's getting clogged. Seasonal, this is definitely, maybe, once a year would be good. But definitely flush that system out. The branch drain is seasonal. Make sure that the piping isn't moved, that there's not any clogs, that the water is still flowing through it. Remove that plug in the inspection port, make sure that the water is flowing the way that it's supposed to. For a surge tank and pump system, definitely follows manufacturer's recommendations because it's going to depend on their filter, how the filter gets cleaned and so forth. Infiltration chambers, so that's for underground, is basically looking in the port, making sure that water is soaking through, that you're not getting an accumulate of any oils or salts in the soil. You might have to get in there and harvest your worm castings too. So it's a good environment for worms, but you're just making sure that it's going to keep that same surface area that it has to be able to soak in that gray water. All right, this is definitely worth noting down, oasisdesign.net. This is Art Ludwig. Lots of Greywater resource on his website. Anywhere from, the branch drains to the laundry landscape, the things not to do. And I love that part too, because I know you can hook up a garden hose to your washing machine and it could be that simple. I would not recommend it. And the reason why, there's too many variables, because, well, what's going to keep it from siphoning out? You don't have any inline vent or any, vent that's going to help keep that water from siphoning with just a standard garden hose. What's the diameter of that garden hose? And what's the length of that garden hose? Is it going to be too much restriction to where it's going to cause problems with my pump? Okay. So I definitely would avoid that scenario. And the pool hose. Why can't I just use that blue pool hose and that will work? Gravity will get it out there. However, if that hose kinks and it doesn't go around corners very well, then it's going to flood back into your laundry room. So the laundry landscape definitely is a good system, and lots of information on there. And all right. So this is a good time for any questions. And also this is my contact information, WMG's information. So too, if you have any questions after today, please drop a line and let us know. All right, Charlie, what do we got?
Great. Thank you, Ryan, for the presentation. Someone asked a question about, so they mentioned that they recently moved to a new home and are not happy with the taste of their water. They're looking at installing a reverse osmosis system, an RO system, to strip out chlorine and other particulates that affect the taste of the water, the drinking water quality. Is there a way, or they know that there's a lot of water wasted with reverse osmosis systems, and they're wondering if there's a way to hook up gray water to that type of setup and maybe a starting point. And I think to start, maybe you could say a little bit about reverse osmosis, just to get people a little familiar.
Definitely. Yeah, so a reverse osmosis system, so that typically is going to be installed underneath your kitchen sink. The water is going to come in, potable water is going to go through that reverse osmosis. It's going to pull out different chlorine or other little particles that may cause off flavor to our water. And then it's going to come out into a service line, kind of a rudimentary way of explaining it. But when it's filtering that out, it's going to flush those contaminants. It's what they call the waste side of the reverse osmosis. Now that reverse osmosis wastewater is still good water for the landscape. Art Ludwig calls it in his book as it's clean water to use. A little cautious on the different contaminants that are coming out. There again, I wouldn't disperse it just in one location every time, get it out, dispersed widely. As far as how you would get that water out from the reverse osmosis, definitely you're going to have to get creative as far as where does the wastewater go now. It's probably just going outside, or it's probably just going into the sewer drain that's right there underneath the sink. So you'd have to figure out a way of getting that waste line to the outside, and then how to get it further out in the landscape. So you might have to create like a little collection distribution to get that water to pump out. Or if you can get gravity at that point to get the water to get out to where you want it in the landscape. But it's definitely, as Art Ludwig says, it's a good resource. I personally haven't ran into that scenario where tapping in a reverse osmosis. So I can't speak with personal experience on how to plumb them, but Art does list it in his book as a do-it-yourself type of installation. But when thinking about that, because reverse osmosis will use, well, it depends on the system, but just as a kind of one scenario, for a gallon of clean water that you're going to drink, it uses 4 gallons to make it. So you got 4 gallons to 1 gallon. So there's a lot of water that's getting basically wastewater. So if you can utilize that, definitely would be a good option. I know personally, where I live, the water doesn't taste good either out of the tap. So here's a plug for the Berkey water filter, and I'm amazed on how water doesn't have any flavor. It's just, anyways. So instead of a reverse osmosis, maybe a filtration system like a Berkey might make sense. But definitely, if you can tap into that gray water source and get it out, that would be good too. All right.
Great. Another question, someone commented, polytubing versus PVC. Wouldn't PVC be less likely to leak?
Polytubing versus PVC. Would PVC be less likely to leak? Not necessarily. If you got your connections good on those barb fittings, it shouldn't leak. But a glued PVC fitting shouldn't leak either. I've seen them leak. But it does, to me, that's why personally, I like to do all the indoor plumbing in PVC pipe, glue in those fittings. But when you read through Art Lovewood's information, he prefers to use very little PVC pipe, which I understand because it's not the way it's made and it's not good for the environment. But the indoor plumbing, it's just me personally. I like to make it all solid glued connections and then use the polytubing. And when I do the polytubing in the outside, in the landscape, I'll put a clamp where it connects to the PVC pipe, to that barb fitting. And then I'll put clamps where, like at the valve, if I do a valve assembly, but that's all I'm clamping. I used to clamp at every T connection, and now I realize that I don't have to in all scenarios. And if it leaks a little bit out of those T connections in the landscape, that's not a bad thing either. But it limits the amount of clamps that you have to get. So it kind of varies depending on what you clamp or not.
Another person asked if you're using non-toxic soaps. Could you share a little bit about soaps for gray water?
Yeah, non-toxic soaps. So definitely when you get to the presentation, there's that slide with all those things to avoid. ecologycenter.org/fact sheets. Lots of information about soaps. But the big thing is we want to avoid any chemicals. We want to avoid salts. So we want to use a soap or a product that doesn't have those different ingredients in it. So those are the things to avoid. But then also it's looking at your product that you're currently using. Does it contain those? If it doesn't, then it's likely a good product to use on the landscape.
Great. And if you're putting a washer outside, what are the electrical needs? Can you use any outlet, or does it have to be a dedicated electric line?
Oh, that's a good question. I would check on the manufacturer. What kind of electrical requirements does it require? And then make sure that you have the right type of electrical setup for it.
Cool. That looks like all the questions we've gotten. Again, if anyone does have questions, the chat icon, it'll pop up if you hover kind of at the bottom of your screen or the right side of your screen somewhere. If you move your mouse around, you'll see the chat icon pop up. Click on that and you can pose the question to the group. I guess along the line of electrical needs, someone mentioned that there was a slide that you had where the electrical outlet, it was a slide of the washing machine outside pretty early on. They said the electrical outlet might be out of code. Do you know much about the code for electric?
No, I'd have to go back and look at those photos. But yeah, there definitely should be a GFI outlet if it's outside. but yeah, that might be a good catch.
Cool.
All right.
So yeah, it seems like we haven't gotten any additional questions. Oh, okay, someone did just come in with a question. Why does the wastewater that all collects into your distribution tank from, say, your shower and your laundry, and that gets pumped out of the landscape, have to then run through a filter? But when it goes straight from your shower to the landscape, doesn't have to be filtered.
Okay. So understanding the question is, why does a collection distribution system have to be filtered, but a branch drain system off my shower does not need to be filtered? So if that's the way that the question is supposed to be, that's how I'm going to answer it. The collection distribution system, the reason why it needs to be filtered is because of the distribution line. And that distribution line is, it's like a landscape irrigation emitter. So it's a very small, tiny little emitter where that gray water is going to come out. And so if it wasn't filtered, then that little tiny emitter is going to get clogged rapidly. And so that's why collection distribution systems always will have a filter on them because of the distribution line that they're using. They're using basically like an irrigation type of drip emitter, if you will. Where a shower branch drain system, you have a 1.5 inch or 2 inch diameter pipe coming out. And so the reason the filter is not going to clog necessarily that line, it may in certain areas, you might have to do a flush on it, but that water is going to go out into the landscape. And then having our mulch, as I mentioned too, organic mulch is always nice to use because water and organic material is life. And with gray water, it's a constant source, so you can flip that mulch around. But the big reason for the filter is how is it going to clog the distribution line? And that's so kind of just to sum it up as that is if it's going to go out through a small little hole, then it has to be filtered.
Follow up to that question, could you just use a larger line in the distribution tank setup?
Yeah, you could use a 1/2 inch full port ball valve like we do for the laundry landscape. But I'd be concerned about your pump if you're not filtering it. So the pump, if it's a dirty pump and it's rated to take, you know, stuff that's going to come through your gray water, then the pump can handle it. But if the pump's not rated to handle that, then you're going to have a filter again.
And one of the two systems that you talked about, it was able to use it had a dirty pump, right? The first of the two.
Yeah, they're most. I think they can take like up to 1/2 inch. Yeah.
Well, we don't have any other questions at the moment, and it's 7:01.
All right. Well, very good.
Yeah.
Go ahead and thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time tonight. Definitely follow up with if you have any questions, please drop me a line or give me a call. Yeah.
And I want to thank everyone for participating in this class as well. Thanks for joining us for the last of the 5 Hydrate classes. And yeah, if you have other questions, reach out to Ryan. We did have someone come. I guess I'll give my goodbye and then I'll pose the last question to Ryan that popped up. But yeah, check out our field studies classes. The Homescape Harvest Tour is happening October 17th. And yeah, hope you all had some inspiration from these classes from the Hydrate series. Want to thank the groups that sponsored these classes. That's Phoenix Smart Water, EPCOR, the Salt River Project, and the Central Arizona Project. Without them, these classes wouldn't be possible. So thank you, everyone, and have a nice night. I'm going to read off the one last follow-up piece. Use a larger line. So yeah, I think it's kind of touching on the 2 different pumps you talked about. Isn't the pump set up to pump all the collected water before it hits the filter in your photo?
In the irrigray. So yeah, it depends on your collection distribution system. Yep. So the aqua to use, the water gets filtered before the pump.
Great.
Yep.
Super. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Learned a lot.
Good.
Everybody stay safe and sane.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Play in your backyards.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Great class.
All right. Yeah, thank you. Whew.
So,
I don't know, that was quick, it felt like. Yeah, so.